Welcome back, it's ImagineLove here. So this video is about to be the Jon Benet Ramsey part 2. So in the first video we left off with the end that Michael Carr was one of the third suspects, and we did not debunk him if he was one of the main suspects or not. So I'm going to continue with that, so stay tuned, grab a snack, put your pajamas on, because this is going to be another long one. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button, make sure you like that, turn on your notifications for more about the unsolved cases, which should be every other weekend. I hope you enjoy this video. It's ImagineLove. Here we go. Alright, so what we left off with also is that the boot prints that they found didn't match any of the 400 people that were being investigated. However, the Ramsey family was deemed innocent, but people still today speculate on what happened to Jonbenet. No one really knows what happened despite the evidence that was discovered that night. For the most part, the police suspected Patsy and Jon as the initial suspect for why Jonbenet went missing. Police was contacted, and then 2 police officers arrived separately at their address and looked around, but they did not see of any evidence of breaking in and entering. So a family friend of the Ramseys, Fleet White, went to look at the house of the crime scene. According to him, they found a piece of glass on the ground and someone had moved it, meaning somebody altered the evidence at that scene. So they believe that maybe they asked Fleet to move the evidence so it didn't look like to stage the murder. There were many clues that were found on Jonbenet's body that misled the investigators. The paintbrush that was used to strangle Jonbenet was from Patsy's paint collection. Jonbenet also had a heart drawn with red ink on her left palm. So there was a heart on her left palm. Like I said earlier, there was signs of sexual assault, but no signs of rape. This person that I used in this article I'm referring to is what he said. Nickel believed that his findings could be attributed to her having vaginitis or rough wiping where there was redness or irritation. Another detective by the name of Lou Smith was assigned to the case. He believed that maybe a pedophile who targeted child beauty queens was the cause of Jonbenet's death. So as the moment during this whole thing that I've told you, Patsy and Jon are the main suspects still. Because the evidence that led the authorities to them and nobody else. And the parents were unofficial targets of the police investigation. When this happened, they didn't go and investigate the parents first. They investigated these other people instead of looking at the parents. Once the DNA became involved, it was determined that the Ramseys were not the cause of Jonbenet's tragic death. And although Carr confessed to the crimes 10 years later, his confession was exposed as a false confession, and it was a hunt for the real killer of Jonbenet. The Ramseys then hired a private investigator when the crime still hadn't been solved. The detective by the name of Ollie Gray believed he knew who killed Jonbenet. He had been on his case ever since it started. He automatically suspected the killer was a male named Michael Helgoth. Helgoth was a 26-year-old male. This is also suspect number 4. And owned a junkyard on the edge of the city. Gray had an interview with NBC and quoted, "There are probably 3 or 4 people who should have been investigated earlier and still need to be investigated." He believed that from the moment Jonbenet went missing, Helgoth and his accomplices were responsible for Jonbenet's death. One of the pieces of evidence implicating Helgoth was the boot print outside of Ramsey's house. And then one of his Helgoth's co-workers believed that someone who was in on the crime still had tapes as well, which I'll get into that in a moment. His co-worker believed that he had tapes. This other person had tapes of Jonbenet's death and how it happened, and a possible confession from Helgoth. However, we will never know if Helgoth committed the crime because after the murder happened, Helgoth also committed suicide. Okay, so another person of interest that Detective Gray was interested in was Gary Olivia. Gary was a known sex offender and was in town during the time of Jonbenet's murder. The detective thinks that the Boulder Police Department should have considered Gray Olivia as a prime suspect, because shortly after Jonbenet's death, an acquaintance of Gary Olivia's had received a call of him saying, "I heard a little girl." He was then arrested. Olivia, that's who I'm talking about, Gary Olivia, just so you have clarification, was arrested in 2000, and police allegedly found a cardboard cutout of Jonbenet in his backpack. However, DNA evidence had cleared Olivia from the case of Jonbenet. However, but he is still facing pornography charges. Or child pornography, excuse me. There then becomes this next suspect, and this is actually the Ramsey's housekeeper, Linda Hoffman Pugh. She did know their routine. She had a key to their house, and her only alibi during that time was that she was sleeping. So, Detective Gray also had someone in interest in mind. His name was Gary Olivia. He was a known sex offender and was in town during the time of Jonbenet's murder. Detective Gray thinks that the police department should have considered Gray Olivia as one of the prime suspects, because shortly after Jonbenet's death, one of Gary's acquaintances received a call of him saying, "I hurt a little girl." Olivia was then arrested in 2000, and when police arrested him, they found a cardboard cutout, I can't talk today, of Jonbenet in his backpack. Though DNA evidence did clear him, he is now facing child pornography charges. The next suspect is one of the ones that I consider should have been looked at a lot more, or at the beginning of this case. It was the Ramsey's housekeeper. So Linda Hoffman Pugh was her name. She knew their routine. She had a house to the key, but her alibi was that she was sleeping. This is where I wonder if she got too mad at Jonbenet for getting up in the night and wanting a bedtime snack and gave her pineapple and dosed it with something, and then Jonbenet didn't fully die, and then that's when it went too far and violent of the strangulation and everything. Um, but that doesn't explain the male DNA and whatever. Another motive for this housekeeper to do this was that she was struggling financially, and she did ask Patsy for a loan, several $1,000s. So that makes me think, well, if she needed the money and she got told no, the ransom note was the $18,000. That's a decent amount of money. She could have needed that much for a loan. But there's nothing that conclusively shows that the housekeeper was involved in the murder, but there's some strange factors. Since the police declared the Ramsey family's home as crime scene, or failed to declare the Ramsey's home as a crime scene, it allowed anybody to walk into the house. So ideally, people thought that it was possible to an intruder or an extended family member may have contaminated the evidence. The media believes that the investigation could have been more thorough. I believe that it should have. I believe that it should have had nobody else, not even the family, to be able to enter that house until they collected the evidence and the DNA and everything and looked through that house super well. However, as a result of that, there now remains countless number of possible suspects and theories, and conspiracy theories even, about Jonbenet's death. Based on the pre-assumed theories, these include kidnapping, guilt, and pedophilia. Because many pedophiles would typically attend to a beauty pageant of underage girls. Which make them an easy target and a possible motive for murder. Experts, in this paper I wrote that experts that study child abuse describe the contents of these pedophile parties, which often consists of recruiting, and training young females to perform proactively for adults, so sex trafficking. These pedophiles would attend the pageants and find the desirable young girl that they would prey on. It was typically during the holidays because it's the best time to host these pedophile parties because pedophiles will blend well within the community. A lot of times, I studied human services, and a lot of times, usually offenders typically like to be in crowds, and so they look for crowds and not secluded because then they blend well and you don't notice. This is a possible theory that may have occurred, that a predator attended to one of Jonbenet's beauty pageants and having a subtle but suspicious method to take her. But they would have to get a key to the Ramsey's front door, so that would be difficult for them to do. He would have to be a well-trusted person by the parents and kids. So if there was, like, let's say, somebody offered private pageant lessons or something like that, and the male taught it, it could have been one of them that came over to the house and got her ready for a pageant, and things went south. Typically with these parties, they trick young females into performing, or even brainwash that for them doing that is a privilege to perform this for adults. It's hold on. Sorry about that. They teach these young kids or young females that it's a privilege, or they brainwash them that it's a privilege to perform those shows for adults. It is contemplated that Jonbenet was asked to do one of these dances, of the dance routines that may have also had a asphyxiation technique to it, where it's like the ribbon and it got caught around her And the dances she was known for often were provocative and resembled routines of the high-end prostitution. Now I'm going to talk to you about the fist method, which Jonbenet may have been asked to perform that could have gone out of hands and caused her death. And then the pedophile may have returned the body to the house to make it look like the parents had murdered their daughter. The last theory that I have on this paper is that Jon Ramsey accidentally killed Jonbenet. It appears Jon knew where Jonbenet's body was, but there were signs that Jon may have sexually molested or abused his kid. That came from an article. I don't know if that's true or not. The theory suggests that Jon led Jonbenet into the basement, telling her he had a Christmas present for her, so she would follow him downstairs. And then once she was in the basement, he then acts onto his sexual desires or gratification on his own daughter, which is awful. And then while doing that, he performs the asphyxiation technique on Jonbenet, and the rope may have tightened and strangled her. He then would go to tell Patsy that something happened to Jonbenet, or he got caught. Which resulted in Patsy throwing a blunt object towards him and possibly missing and hitting Jonbenet to hit her in the head, causing it for her to fall to her death. And then they decide to come up with a plan to cover this up. That wasn't the last theory, sorry. I think this one is. Let me check. Yes, this is the last theory. I'm sorry about that. So this last theory is about Patsy. It was that she was worried about having to put Jonbenet into beauty pageants, and then was convinced that Jonbenet. Hold on. She then would have convinced Jonbenet to come downstairs, making her think she was getting a special surprise. Then she makes it into a game for Jonbenet. Once her back is turned, Patsy does a blitz attacks Jonbenet, striking her in the head with a flashlight. Which doesn't, to me, make sense because she was found, there was a tweed cord and an end of a Garrett-made brush, which is part of a paintbrush. So I don't know how that becomes a flashlight. So that's where I don't really believe in this theory. But anyways, and then once Jonbenet is lifeless, Patsy writes the ransom note and then cuts up the tweed cord Garrett and ties it around Jonbenet's neck, finishing killing her. This also says that she may have done it out of religious countermeasures for repentance, because she made Jonbenet participate in beauty pageants and attending pedophile parties. Or she may have just, like I said before, trying to put her out of her misery. Now we're going to go back to when Burke was a suspect. There's theories that believe Burke may have been envious of his sister for getting all the attention from her mother. So when they were playing in the basement, when he could have been angry for Jonbenet receiving all the attention, he decides to strike her in the head, leaving her unconscious. And then Burke may have gone upstairs to tell the parents, and they covered it up again. So had them, Patsy and Jon, cover that up. The theories that I did mention are very far-fetched, so it's hard to determine what actually happened because of the mistakes and all the misleading information in this case. However, nobody knows. No one knows about knows what happened. But we have some of these theories, and that might contain hidden meanings or clues. You'd have to read it line by line. They do believe that Jon and Patsy are still hiding stuff back to protect Burke. My question is, did the authorities use the gloves when they were dealing with the evidence? Why were people allowed in the house when it was a crime scene? Because this young girl was taken right from her, or her future was taken right from her because of a vicious murder. Or perhaps an extended family member or friend helped cover it up, or they committed the crime. My question is, will the person who killed Jonbenet ever be found? Hopefully, but until technology advances, the chance for Jonbenet's killer could be still alive today, or it could be one of the ones I mentioned in there. My view personally, I think Burke should have been looked more at, and definitely the housekeeper. The housekeeper is what I think makes a lot more sense, because she needed money, she asked for money, and she got denied it, and she asked for several thousands, and then the ransom note is $18,000. So I think that was the motive. I think the housekeeper did that, but I don't know, because I'm not a police investigator, but that is my opinion on who killed Jonbenet. But I also believe that the housekeeper may have stumbled upon her father doing some inappropriate stuff with Jonbenet, and things went out of hand. So that is my theory, and that's what I have on Jonbenet. I hope you enjoyed this video, and make sure you like and subscribe, and my next case will be out next weekend. It's ImagineLove. Till next time.